You decide. You're sick of being your industry's best kept secret, of feeling like you're wasting your potential and that only your mum and your best friend seem to care what you're doing. And you get all fired up. You're like, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to become prolific. I'm going to start publishing. And you open up whatever app of choice and you start scrolling. And the more you scroll, the more you get overwhelmed, frustrated, dejected, defeated. What's the point? There is no point, said your ego in a weird accent, because your ego, it's scared that you might put yourself out there and you could look silly. God forbid you hit publish on a post and it only gets 3 likes and a comment from maybe a bot and your mum, if you're lucky. And so it would rather you don't try at all. Well, guess what, ego? You are wrong. You know nothing. And that is why I am creating this video. I've been helping people build magnetic brands for the last 10 years. And I know we are in a time where it feels like it is impossible to stand out, that it's just, you're too late. You missed the bandwagon and there is no point in even publishing. And I also know what it's like to have all those little voices in your head saying like, no one's going to want to hear what you have to say. Who are you to start publishing? Blah, blah, blah. Like there's already people out there saying the things that you're going to try and say, and why would they choose you over somebody else? I know all of it. But what I happen to know is that standing out is not just possible, it is completely doable, simpler than you actually think. And what it really just comes down to is, how bad do you want it? Are you prepared to put in the work? If you know that you finally putting yourself out there could be the thing that just changes your entire life, because finally people will know what it is you're about and they'll value you and opportunities will start rolling in, which is absolutely what can happen, then I suggest you watch the whole video, because we have got an action plan to talk about. We need to start by talking about the elephant in the room, or elephants. Claude, ChatGPT, and the countless other AI-related tools that are out there at the moment that mean our news feeds are being pumped with crappy AI-generated content, which can make you feel like it's just too noisy. Now, here's the thing. If you are prepared to do the scary thing and actually bring the real you into your content, standing out right now in this day and age is actually easier than you think, because the majority of people are using those tools and they are producing stuff that is generic and forgettable. Some platforms are even developing ways to detect whether AI content is being published, and they are deprioritizing it and prioritizing real content. So we are actually in the day and age where, because so many people have gotten lazy and are utilizing AI in a bad way, you have this opportunity to stand out just by being you, which is pretty epic. Now, I know it's not quite as straightforward as just being the real you, but where we can assume that standing out requires insane skills, a perfect curated brand identity, polished template, everything being on point. Yes, those things might help and they can amplify what it is that you're bringing to the table. But in my humble opinion, and again, I have been doing this for the last 10 years and also building my own brand this way, the thing that I know makes thought leaders, personal brands, content creators all stand out, it's actually 5 elements that are already within you. And those 5 elements combined create your onlyness factor. So let's quickly break down those 5 elements, and then we're going to get into how we really lean into them, because it does not happen accidentally. It is a process, but these 5 things, like I said, they're built into your blueprint. So the first one is your spark. That is your natural personality. And so see why, if you're going to be leaning into AI generated content, already chances are you're cutting yourself off from the ability to amplify your real personality, which is part of your onlyness factor. So our spark can show up in our tone of voice. It can show up in the visuals that we use, the colors that we choose, whether it's in writing or in video or in audio. It all is going to actually give people a little spark of who you actually are as a person. If you don't mute it, if you don't over edit yourself. The second factor is what you have behind your spark, which is your story. So that every single thing that you have ever been through is a part of your story, and that is all going to weave together to create something unique, because your lived experience and your professional experience, those series of events that led you to doing what it is that you do today, are another way that no one else has that exact same journey as you. So of course, that is another part of your onlyness factor. Part number 3 is your strengths, the natural natural gifts that you were born with and the skills that you have developed. But these things, when leveraged properly, so when we actually lean into these things to create our content and everything that we're putting out there, gives you another unique edge. For instance, some people are better at writing things than saying them out loud. Some people are great on camera. Some people prefer to be behind the screen. It doesn't really matter as long as we find the things that we're really naturally good at and we can leverage those things in our content. The fourth thing is the one that I think it tends to be the most underdeveloped in the world at the moment, okay? And AI is absolutely contributing to this because it's proven that it's making us lazy. Your stance, your unique point of view, your perspective, like what you think about the world, about the issues that you're solving, about what you believe is the solution, all of that perspective, the lens that you wear, that you see the world through, is something that absolutely makes you stand out and is a non-negotiable agreement if you are actually interested in being a thought leader. But it is also going to be really important if you're any sort of service provider who does something that other people also do, which is most of us. Like, it's quite rare to have a niche that is so niche that like no one else on the planet does what you do. Like, yes, no one does it exactly the same way as you. But for instance, if you are a coach, like a business coach, there are going to be so many options out there of business coaches. And what helps someone determine whether or not they want to listen to you and then work with you, it is your perspective, your philosophy, okay? So that is thing number 4 in your little cocktail of ingredients. The final thing is your style. And style is something that, again, it shows up in how we present ourselves. It's how we use our words. It is how we display our content. All of those little things, like you can see right now, there's literally personal style. There's what you're wearing and how you've styled yourself. There's style in terms of I'm showing you my style with my backdrop. Like, this is true to me. And all of these little details add up to making a really big difference, because it's also so much about what makes you memorable and recognizable. Like when someone is scrolling, if as they're scrolling past, be like, oh, hang on, I think I missed a post from Susan or from Beta, because of your style. Like, that is so powerful. So we've got spark, story, strengths, stance, and style. And these things all are your onlyness factor. But like I said, they don't just happen, even though they're in you. For instance, like I just said, style can keep being developed. So can your stance, like your point of view, your perspective. You might have one today, but what you will find is over time, if you're actually working on it, it gets stronger. It will get more unique. Even your personality, of course it's there. Of course, everyone who knows you knows your personality. But one of the challenges with personal branding and creating content is that if we're not confident, if we haven't developed our way of showing up yet, and we're still a little bit like, oh, I'm checking the boxes and I'm hoping I'm doing this right, our personality can get muted and not be coming through in our content. And so none of these things can be taken for granted. And we need to put the work in to make sure we're really leveraging these things and developing them and mastering them so that we really have an onlyness factor that actually makes us stand out. Because yes, everyone has an onlyness factor, but if we don't know about it, if we're not seeing the things that contribute to what makes you completely unique, then it's not going to do anything. So one of the things that we're going to need is self-awareness. We need to get much clearer on what these 5 things are about us. Like, this is why I love things like human design, gene keys, astrology, personality tests. Every single time I do one of these, it's like another little mirror that's held up to me and showing me different things that make me unique. And I'm not saying to follow them like the Bible and it's like, oh my gosh, it's told me who I am. No, but like if things ring true to you and you're like, oh, that is me. And oh, actually, I do like that about myself. Like, it gives you a little mini permission slip each time to lean into it further and start really exploring how that actually ties back into what it is that you're sharing. Then we have got skills development. You developing your ability to share. Like, do you have the skills that is going to allow you to amplify these 5 elements of yourself in what it is that you're doing, in your messaging, in your content? Like when someone first starts creating YouTube videos, if they've never been on camera before, even for me, when I first started, even though I leveraged my natural strengths, so taking taking my own advice, I had a background as an actor. So it made sense for me to be on camera because I was already comfortable on camera. But communicating on YouTube and showing the real me versus playing a character, it was a whole nother story. Like it was a lot scarier for me to do. And I really had to develop the ability to get more and more grounded in my content and feel like the real me was shining through versus me, the actor, being like, hi, I'm Kat and I'm reading a script. And literally my light just went out as I said that. So there we go. Okay, we've done an emergency light adjustment and it's just going to have to be a little bit moodier for the rest of this recording, but I'm not stopping to recharge my light for the next hour. So we've talked about self-awareness and we've talked about skills, because how skilled we are as, for instance, communicators, how skilled we are at really maximizing the potential of a particular platform. So there are going to be skills that are specific to, for instance, YouTube, titles and thumbnail development and, recording videos and editing. Those are skills, but then you've got a different set of skills that might be needed on LinkedIn or on Instagram or TikTok. So those are all important too. But then we come back to what I was saying about in particular, your stance, which is like the thing that as an expert, like this is my stance. Here's what I believe, or here's my expertise about the industry. And here's what I believe about the industry, like what needs to change and what are the problems and what's broken and how am I helping fix it? When we develop a really strong stance, what happens eventually is along with those 4 other ingredients of your onlyness factor, we create a niche of one. There becomes no one else like us. I mean, again, there's already no one else like you, but that doesn't mean everyone else knows that yet. Okay. So the key is for people to know there is no one but you. And so if they agree fully with what you're saying about your area of expertise, the competition is gone for them because they're attached to you and only you. So the journey that we go on to develop this onlyness factor, it's not necessarily a destination. There's never a destination because as a thought leader, you are going to continue to evolve. Your stance will shift over time. But let's pretend that you're starting out this journey and you've never really committed to this process before. Here is what I take my clients through, the recommendations that I give and the sort of the journey that I guide them through. So I would suggest you grab a notepad and pen or your favorite note-taking device at this point, because I'm going to talk fast because there's a lot to cover. But essentially, any thought leader. So, and by the way, when I say thought leader, you might go like, ooh, I'm not a thought leader. That's like, ooh. But essentially, if you are wanting to be a content creator and have people on the other end, like hire you or pay you for your expertise, and it's directly related to your content, I'm sorry, but like what you are doing is going on a thought leader's journey. Okay. So just get used to it. You don't have to call yourself a thought leader, but know you're going on the thought leader's journey. That is what I'm helping you with. Okay. So all thought leaders start in the same place. They start where they're at. They start with what they know, and often with no following and with, maybe some great ideas, but they're very underdeveloped because they haven't been sharing them yet. And one of the most powerful ways for us to develop not just skills, but to develop our ideas is through feedback loops. It's through actually sharing the things that we are learning or developing, making sure that they land on an audience's ears, in their ears, and that we get some feedback. And some of that feedback comes from the audience itself, but you also sort of create your own feedback by sharing and then going, ooh, that didn't land as much as I wanted it to, or like, oh, next time I might actually do it a certain way, or oh, that felt a bit cringe for me to do that. I might not do that again. Feedback loops are created in all these different ways, but every single time you hit publish on an idea, you get valuable data that helps you go back and strengthen that idea the next time around. And so with this in mind, knowing that we need to be in this process of sharing, feedback looping, rinse and repeat, the journey I encourage my clients to go on, and encourage is force them to go on, like what they know they're signing up for when they work with me, is that we are not going to be in a silo and for months and months on end just tinker away and develop ideas and come up with all these like hypotheses and create all this stuff behind the scenes and do nothing with it. We are going to do some work on that stuff that we were talking about. So there is going to be the self-awareness work. We are going to look at like, what are these initial ideas and perspectives and what are the strengths that you have? And we're going to create our minimum viable strategy. Like what is the minimum viable approach that we can take to start getting you out there as soon as possible? And that I call these magnetism experiments. So what we're going to do is set a period of time where you're going to be publishing, like let's say for 3 months initially, based on what we know about you today. So those 5 things. So like based on your spark, your story, your stance, your strengths, your style. Let's formulate a plan that makes sense, a platform that makes sense for you to start on, a publishing schedule that makes sense, some content formats, some topics, and we go, right, based on what we know today, this seems like a great idea, but we don't know. We don't know how much of this will land and stick around or need to evolve unless we start sharing. So the idea is to get sharing as quickly as possible and to know that what you're doing is running an experiment. So there is no pass or fail. We do not care whether or not you only get those 3 likes and 2 comments, and one of them is from a bot. Like that doesn't matter because we've started. And the longer you go, the better you get at explaining your ideas, the more valuable and interesting and unique your ideas become. And you are going to inevitably attract more of an audience as you go. And it's funny because we often, feel really like, oh, I don't feel like I should really be sharing, like, because I don't have much of an audience yet. It's like, well, firstly, you're never going to have an audience unless you start sharing. But also one of the gifts during this experiment is that you tend to have a much smaller audience and it takes a lot of the pressure off. As someone who has built a larger following for herself, trust me when I say that the pressure is so much greater these days, where I can get very like, oh my gosh, if it's not good enough, I can't hit publish because there's so many more people to judge it. So there is a gift in being almost invisible in the beginning. It is your little playground. Have fun with it. It won't last, because if you follow the process that I'm talking about, you will grow because it's inevitable. So just to recap where we're at so far, we're going minimum viable, and that usually means one platform, like minimum styles of content, creating a couple of basic templates so that you just remove the overthinking, and then you publish for a certain amount of time. And at the end of that period of time, you're going to read the data. You're going to go, what did I learn from this? What worked? What didn't? What would I change next time? Why do I think certain things worked better than other? There's a lot of insights that we can get. We put our strategy hat on at that point, but we don't really put a true strategist hat on until then. And you see how this might be a little bit different. One of the reasons I believe that there's so much vanilla content out there and everyone's feeds look kind of the same is because we get too attached to strategy very early on. And we're like, okay, well, I need to be doing how-to posts and I need to do this. And here's all the ways that I'm going to check the boxes. And you end up with everyone just publishing the same kind of thing instead of approaching it like, okay, I'm going to start by developing my ideas, developing my skills, and then I'm going to start to get more strategic because I will have been paying attention to what performed better. So it's like, okay, so interesting. My audience seems to really like it when I talk about this and this. Also, I'm now in this process getting clearer on what am I even trying to achieve with all of this. Actually, I've shifted my goals. Before it was to get a promotion, but I actually think I'm going to want to get a job at a different workplace. So maybe I need to focus on something different. Like I want to change industries. So maybe some of my content now needs to factor in, topics that are related to that new industry. But we do all of this once we've run that first experiment, we've gotten over ourselves, gotten over all of that resistance, and we're just putting ourselves out there. And ultimately, what I find in the very long-term journey, and this doesn't always happen, sometimes this is already in place from the beginning, but what we often start with is like our personality tends to lead. Like our personality will allow us to stand out initially. And that's great. Like we want your personality to stand out, but keep in mind that your personality tends not, unless you're a comedian or something, or like an influencer maybe, your personality tends to not be the thing that is going to land you clients or a new role or a promotion. It will be a factor for sure, but it's not enough on its own. That's not what makes you an authority. Over time, the stronger your ideas get, your stance gets, the more weight you have as an expert. And so originally it was your personality that made you that really sort of was the main factor in terms of your onlyness factor. Then it becomes your perspective, your stance becomes the thing that really stands out and people remember you for. And hot tip, this is a helpful little prompt that I've used before with ChatGPT. So there are a few thought leaders that came to mind where I happen to know about their story, that they started in one niche and then they ended up pivoting or evolving over time. So Lewis Howes is someone, Gary Vaynerchuk, Marie Forleo, even Simon Sinek too. If you ask ChatGPT to give you a timeline of their thought leadership journey and sort of the takeaways in terms of where they started and how their message evolved and their approach evolved, that is so fascinating, because you see that, like Lewis Howes, for instance, his original niche, which was a bit not random, but a bit like boring, LinkedIn was his specialty, and he was just running webinars and things on LinkedIn, which is nothing like, he doesn't talk about LinkedIn anymore. Look how broad his School of Greatness brand is. But he started with what he knew, and that worked for him. And this is also another little clue. Like, so you start with what you know, and sometimes it's a little bit more specific and narrow. That's a great doorway to at least start to build some authority. And as you build that audience and that trust, it can get easier to broaden out. And that's how you end up with these massive personal brands that don't seem to have any particular niche or specialty. But we often model that as like, oh, I want to be as successful as Lewis Howes or as Marie Forleo. And we kind of model what they're doing today, forgetting this massive journey led them to that. And so again, knowing that this is not a destination, do not be modeling what people who are 10, even 20 years into their journey are doing right now. Start with what you know, start sharing, and get really good at paying attention to that feedback and making adjustments. But just know that ultimately that strategy that you're building, if it's built around those 5 elements of your onlyness factor, you will have the sustainability of that strategy that guarantees your success. Like, it becomes a when, not an if. But if you are trying for the tactics, the trend hopping, the reverse engineering what other people are doing, like trying to just copy what someone else's strategy is today and then force yourself to do things that don't come naturally to you, you're going to struggle to stick with it. And you're also going to struggle to get the results, because if you're not leveraging your onlyness factor and you're using your weaknesses and not your strengths kind of thing, like, of course you're not going to stand out. Like, it's going to be really difficult. So speaking of the sustainability, I find that the first hump that we have to get over is starting. And that is it's a big hump. Like, it's really challenging to get started if you're starting from nothing. Like, as they say, like a body in motion stays in motion, but getting something moving for the first time requires so much more energy output than to just keep it going, which is again why the experiment, why minimum viable magnetism. Like, if you can make it as simple as possible to start and just get started and be as consistent as possible, you'll kick into momentum. And so that can be really powerful. However, personal motivation that tends to get us started tends not to be enough to keep us going. And one thing that I recommend doing now, wherever you're at in the journey, is connecting to a deeper intrinsic motivation that is related to something bigger than you, something to do with impact and or legacy. What is the change that you really want to make in the world? If you were going to leave behind one message, or you were going to create some sort of ripple effect in an industry or a community or whatever that may be, like, what is that? And try and find something that really gets you excited and feels just important. Because if you can do that and have it written down and like plastered over your walls to remind you on the days when you're like, oh, I'm not getting the comments, I'm not getting the likes, no one likes what I'm doing, blah, 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 blah. Maybe I should just give up. Remember why you're doing this. Remember who you're doing this for. And that can be really powerful. But then there's one other thing. So we all have these built in, and I think I mentioned this at the very beginning of the video, like our egos like to protect us from what they think is going to be dangerous. And when we start talking about making big changes, for instance, increasing visibility, putting yourself out there, that can seem very risky to your ego. Like, it doesn't want you making those changes. It likes you where it can see you. It likes you to be protected from any potential negative feedback, because obviously there are trolls out there and it's like, I don't want you to get hurt. And what the ego does when it's sensing any sort of danger in what it is that we're going to be doing, it kicks into protective patterns, and it is going to find all these ways to sneakily self-sabotage, which again, it's like self-sabotage is actually self-protection, but often it's misguided. Like, it's not helpful. It's keeping us away from our goals. But these patterns are things that will stop us. They're the reason we will start publishing and then just stop all of a sudden, or why we'll stay in planning mode for 6 months and never hit publish on that very first post. And so that is the work that I do the most. Like the reason most clients come to me is because of these blocks, these patterns. And I created a quiz called the Anti-Magnetic Archetypes quiz because I have found that there are 10 patterns that people tend to have. And often you'll have one or two that are the biggest influences in all of your actions and your decision making. And we need to know what these are upfront so that they do not have power over us. Like, because once you see them, you can't unsee them, and you're less likely to let yourself get away with that self-sabotaging behavior. So I highly recommend, as the next step after watching this video, is go take that quiz, find out what those patterns are for you, find out what is your anti-magnetic archetype, and just have that in mind when you are either building out your strategy or assessing your existing strategy and going like, why isn't it working? Go, oh, am I factoring this in? Do I have any protocols in place to help me avoid getting taken off track with these? So that is my recommendation, but I really hope the rest of this video was helpful and practical. Let me know what questions you have because I will do plenty of follow-up videos if I have any requests. And if you go take the quiz, come back and let me know which one you got. And I'm happy to also give you a few extra tips in regards to content creation and building out a strategy specific to your particular archetype. Like if you know you've got a certain archetype, I will be like, okay, cool. In your strategy, you're going to want to think about this. Okay. So free coaching basically in the comments if you're brave enough to share. Thank you for watching and I will see you on the next one. Bye for now.